It is good to see all of your smiling faces. We are now live and on the air, so everything you say from now on will be known by people all over the world. It's good to have you here. For those that are new to this class, we call it Foundations of Messianic Judaism. It is an open forum discussion class where you can ask questions about Messianic Judaism, about Christianity, about the connection between the two or the disconnection between the two. We started this class because we had a whole bunch of people that started coming to our synagogue from other faiths or from no faith at all background, and we wanted to make sure they all started on solid footing, solid ground. So we started this class so people could ask questions, because surprising as it may seem, people will not make appointments just to ask questions. They will just carry those questions around in hopes that at some point I will read their minds and answer their question. So we started this class so I would not have to work so hard reading your minds. We always begin with prayer. Please pray for Jennifer Conrad's family. She passed yesterday evening, late. Be praying for the whole family. We did find out one interesting thing about her family. As I get older and as I travel the world and as I do things, I find how interesting it is that people are connected with other people in unique ways. Jennifer's son-in-law is Renee Leggett's boss in Naples. So Renee Leggett is an officer in the Navy. She's a flight surgeon. She works in a facility in Naples. Her person above her is actually Jennifer's son-in-law. And when they met at the station, they had to fill out a little form, a little information about you, and put something unusual down. And she put unusual, I'm a Messianic Jew. And that started this whole talk, and which ended up with, hey, my mother-in-law and you go to the same congregation in Pensacola. But they didn't meet till they went to Italy. So anyhow, we had a nice visit with the family. They appreciate all your prayers. Please continue to pray for them as they go through this period of mourning. Also, Brooke, her mother is ill and her brother's going through a family crisis, so please pray for her. Any other prayer requests? Yes, Sam?
My brother Tim was scheduled to have hip replacement, but due to his EKG or whatever, they're wanting to postpone now for the service and all that. So just prayers for
Prayer for Tim. He was supposed to have a EKG, but they're holding off on that or a hip replacement, but they're holding off on that because of bad EKG results. We want that to change. Fred?
My son called this morning and asked if you pray for him. He's on his way to Billings, Montana, wants traveling mercy, and how did that full trip?
This is Paul.
Paul.
Yeah, please pray for Fred's son, Paul. Yes.
Pray for Sam.
Yeah, Sam for his back, and Joanne for full and complete recovery. Jennifer?
The whole situation with this weather balloon from China and everything else that's going on and all of these political
Shenanigans
all over the world.
My brother traveled back from Michigan, and my niece Evie is we're figuring out her heart condition is diagnosed with.
Yeah, Beverly's niece Evie has a heart. Beverly, I mean.
Who's Beverly?
Bethany. Bethany. It was Bethany and Evie mixed together. Came out Bethany. Beverly's niece Evie. Did I say it wrong again? Marilyn. Okay, let me try again. Bethany, her niece Evie, has a heart issue, and we want to pray for her, plus her brother is traveling. We want to pray for him as he travels. Craig is traveling back from Texas. Yes. Yeah, Marquita for her voice. Also Michael, who is, he doesn't attend here, but he's virtually attends Our congregation has laryngitis for about 4 weeks now, I believe. So we want to pray for him. Ivan?
My sister, Denise, in Pennsylvania, has dementia.
Okay, pray for Ivan's sister Denise. Donna?
My daughter Lori has shingles, and she's going to have knee surgery.
Lori has shingles and is going to need to have knee surgery. Joanne?
One of the teachers at my father's Arrows is going to be having knee surgery. She's already had one done. Now it's the next one. So
Okay, one of the teachers, do we know her first name? Or
Jan.
Jan is having knee surgery. Anyone else?
One last one, man.
Yes.
Just for the staff and the kids at my father's Arrows.
Okay, all the staff and kids at my father's Arrows. Miss Lita is having some tests done. We want to pray for strength and encouragement for Miss Lita. Dave?
I had an Aunt Betty, had a heart attack this week. She's probably in her 80s. And first of all, I want to say thank God for Aunt Betty. She was a wonderful aunt to me growing up, and I'm so thankful for that. It's a blessing. But just prayers for her. She's in hospice.
Prayers for Dave's Aunt Betty. She's in hospice, and she was a wonderful aunt to Dave, so we want to pray for her, yes.
Praise to Adonai for the wonderful move of furniture from Anna and Tim's one home to the new one, and for continued help and assistance when they start moving all the little stuff.
Yeah, so transitioning from one home to the other, and also I think they're transitioning Lita into their home. So pray as all of that goes on. Yes, Donna?
My sister-in-law Terry is home now. She's got end-stage COPD, is on hospice.
Pray for Terry, end-stage COPD. Also, Jonathan, Rabbi Jonathan, Rebitz, and Catherine are home today. They have whatever's going around, so they're congested and all that kind of stuff. Eli does not have anything, so we're praying that he continues to remain healthy and well, but please pray that they will recover quickly. Anyone else real quick? Yes.
For my son James, who's out in the field with the military for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, for James, who's out in the field with the military for the next 2 weeks, and for Corbin. Please pray for him. Anyone else? Okay. Abba, Father, we're so grateful that we have a mishpocha, a family that share our needs one with another, and know that we will be praying and talking to you about each and every one of these needs, knowing and expecting that you are going to meet these needs supernaturally, and that there's going to be a testimony that comes forth as a result of these prayers being prayed. Abba, we ask that you'll help us to remember each of these requests every time we pray, so that we will be faithful to call these before you. In Yeshua's name, amen. And I want to thank Bobsy for the dark chocolate she brought me today. It is... If you brought me chocolate, I'd have got your name right too, Beverly. I know it's... The problem is, here's the reality. I have called Bethany Nenany for so long, because that's what her nieces and nephew call her. But I can't call her Nenany in front of you guys because it would just look childish. So it was better for me to call her the wrong name by accident, I guess. I don't know. I have never worried about that before. I don't know. I think, anyhow. Look, there's a Chinese weather balloon up there. It's causing confusion and things, so we'll just... Yeah, so anyhow, we have a number of questions that came in. These are all questions that came from people that are within our community, and questions, with the exception of one, that are from people who are actually in the room right now. So I'm going to go through those questions. I do want you to ask questions of your own and interact with these questions with other questions, should you have questions. Okay. I also want to... I can't say that again. I also want to ask... Most of you know that in, I think it's 12 days, a group of us will be going to Israel. So we want to pray that everything goes smoothly with that everybody's flights go are on time. There's no weather delays, any of those kind of things as that trip happens. So please pray for all of that.
And the meeting?
Yeah, and we're having a meeting today for the people going to Israel at 1 o'clock. Just an informational meeting. So if you're going to Israel with me, please make plans to be in the meeting at 1 o'clock. Okay, here's our first question. In Exodus 17, 14 through 16, verse 14, it says, Adonai says he will blot out the memory of the Amalekites. Verse 16, Moses says Adonai will have war with Amalek generation to generation. Do we know who the descendants of Amalek are today? No. We really don't, but there's a spirit of Amalek, which is what we're dealing with when it says that there will be war from generation to generation. It's the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic spirit of Amalek. Now, to give you just a little history, at this time, the chief enemies of Israel are the Philistines and the Amalekites. The Philistines, Philistine, by the way, the word Philistine means invaders. And the Philistines today, the word Philistine in Hebrew, Philistine is the word for Palestinian. It is where the name Palestine came from. It was purposely given to the region that includes Israel by the Romans to blot out Israel from the map. Okay? There was no land of Philistia that encompassed the land of Israel. The Philistines lived largely in what's known as the Gaza Strip right now. The reason the Philistines lived in the Gaza Strip region was because the tribe of Dan was supposed to have taken that land, but they rejected the beachfront property for mountain property up in the north of Israel, above the Galilee area. So the tribe of Dan did not take the land that they were assigned to take. It remained an area where the Philistines were able to get a foothold, and so that's where the Philistines come from. The Philistines differed from the Amalekites in that the Philistines were basically one-time or two-time a year marauders. They would wait until everything was planted and everything was getting ready to harvest and people harvested, and then they would come out, they would gather the harvest, and they would go back to their homes and they would eat off of the products of other people. So that's kind of the motive of the Philistines. They left everybody alone mostly through the year except for when the harvest was being gathered. And then they would go out, they would gather the harvest from the people who were harvesting. They would go back having stole their produce. It's kind of like the federal government. In that aspect, we work all year long, and once a year they come and get part of our harvest and go back to their little conclave in Washington, D.C. So that kind of gives you the idea of what the Philistines were. The Amalekites, however, were more like the Comancheros that came from Mexico into the United States, and it was regular raids. It wasn't that they came once a year and you could plan on them coming. They were constantly invading, constantly taking and murdering and stealing and stuff like that. So that's the difference in the motives and the operation of the Philistines versus the Amalekites. The Amalekites were just evil for the sake of evil against the people that were in the land of Israel. The Philistines were more opportunist. It wasn't that they hated the Israelites, and they stayed in Philistia, in that little land, most of the time, except for when they were harvesting. The Amalekites murdered and killed and raped and pillaged all the time out of hatred, which is where this spirit of Amalek comes from. It's that destructive, hateful spirit. Yes, Dave?
Going back to David and Goliath, the word Philistine, did it mean something different?
No, it was meant invader. That word actually means invader.
Okay. So was it the same people,
Yes, that the Philistines were the Philistines. Now, there is argument about where they came from. And the arguments go, the historians argue about whether they come from the Greek area and came in, or whether these were people like the Hagar the Horrible, where those guys called Vikings. People from that area that would come, that came down, established a community, and lived off of other people's harvests. And that was largely how they operated. But they were people from either the Greek lands or the Norse who came down, is the two biggest positions on that. Yes, sir.
Neither of those groups are the ones that are the...
Neither of those groups are the ones that are called Palestinians today. Right. The Palestinians today are people that lived in the region, mainly in Jordan, Egypt, Syria, and Lebanon, who had some kind of travels through Israel. People forget, because the news media has drastically changed the history, that, for instance, when Mark Twain traveled through the land of Israel, he wrote extensively on his travels, and it was almost uninhabited. He traveled from the Negev to the Golan and barely saw a human. There were shepherds that lived there. There were some nomadic people that lived there, but it wasn't a nation that was established. Yasser Arafat was an Egyptian, not a Palestinian. But when for political gains, the group of Arabs that were living in Israel in 1948 took upon them in 1967, 68, 70, in that area, the identification of Palestinian, so that the nations, the people in the UN, would feel bad for this downtrodden group of people and supply them with billions of dollars in aid because of their being dispersed from their land. Now, that same UN didn't think that it would be helpful to give the same equal amount of money to the Jewish people that were driven out of Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, Egypt, all during the same time. But there was basically, numerically, an equal number of Arabs that left the land of Israel to go out of Israel, to an equal number of Jews that were dispersed from the Arab lands in 1948 that came to Israel. So between 600,000, 700,000, both directions. The UN felt it was very important to supply a lot of money to the Arabs that were dispersed, but they didn't give any money to the Jews that were dispersed from those lands. All of their money, all of their land, all of their resources taken as they came to the Promised Land. So that all took place at that same time, within a very short time, about 600,000 to 700,000 both directions. But none of them were called. Matter of fact, in 1932, and you can look it up, the flag of Palestine, which was the region, not the nation, was a Star of David, not some kind of Arab insignia. Now, I want to be very clear. My heart hurts for the Arab people that were dispersed and for the Jews that were dispersed. I think the land belongs to Israel. It is the historic land of Israel. I understand all that. But before the UN got involved, before the involvement of the Balfour Declaration and all that came on, the Jews and Arabs in Israel lived together, working together. When it became political, instead of just being the land, politics ruins everything. And so there's a lot of politics that go on, and then religion prepped up politics among all the peoples there. So it's important. I had a discussion. I'll see your hand. I had a discussion with somebody the other day because we're having, at our men's conference, and I hope all of our men have signed up to come to the men's conference, we're having, Rabbi Eric Carlson is one of the speakers, but Rabbi Ibar Akın is going to be there, who is a Turkish believer in Yeshua, former Muslim, became a believer in Yeshua, became a Messianic rabbi in Seattle area, but now has walked away from working in a synagogue and is primarily working with Afghani refugees to share Messiah with them in the Oregon, Upper California, Seattle. There's a large contingent of them. And I mentioned, there was a conversation that went on about Messianic Jews being involved in outreach to Muslims. And someone said, we have so few resources, why are we dedicating them to reaching out to Muslims? And my answer was, first of all, the Scripture tells us to love those that hate us. There's a whole Scripture about the one of the ways we demonstrate God's love is to love those who hate us. Now, when I say love those who hate us, that doesn't mean become a martyr necessarily to their aggression. But the most loving thing we can possibly do to or for anyone is to share Messiah with them. Amen. And the majority of Jews in the United States, which is where my ministry resides, I love and support ministry in Israel, in Russia, in India, in Africa, all those places that people are ministering to. I want it to happen South Central America, everywhere. But my primary, where I live, where I minister, is the United States. In the United States, 80+% of the Jewish people here are liberal Democrats who, like the Democrats in Congress, vote consistently to support the Palestinians over Israel. Okay? Consistently to support the Muslims over the Israelis, over the Jews. Even the Jewish members of Congress vote that way. So my feeling is, one of the ways we can reach the Jewish non-believers is by demonstrating love to the Arab people by sharing the good news, not by bowing down before them in their false religion, but by demonstrating the true love of sharing the good news with them and ministering to them so that we can align with that portion of the Jewish people who are supportive of those people, so they see us loving them, so it takes that barrier of Bible believers hate Arabs, which we don't. We do hate the religion of Islam, as we do all other false religions. But we don't hate the people involved. We love them enough to share the good news with them. So part of our emphasis to reach Jewish people and non-Jewish people with the love of Messiah is to demonstrate that love of Messiah by reaching out to even those who hate us, which is to a large extent the Muslim people, because of what they're taught, to hate the people of the book. So again, not Arabs, because there's a lot of Muslims who aren't Arabs. Persians, the Iranians are not Arabs, they're Persians. But most of them are also Muslim. So we have to make sure we're honest and fair about how we deal with these things. But I in my heart is to reach all people, every creature, all of God's creation with the message of Messiah, which includes Muslims. And if our love for the Muslims and our love demonstrated by our faith and by presenting them with the good news results in Jewish people coming to faith because they see us loving them, then that's a wonderful result and response to what we do. The same reason we feed the homeless, the same reason we do those things. It's to demonstrate God's love to people, because it's God's love that attracts people to God, not hatred. So anyhow, Sam had a question. Yes. You're wrong. Sorry. Oh, you want me to wait for the question before I...
Isn't there a lot of Arabs that are good citizens of upstanding in Israel and serve in Israeli military as well?
Yes. Contrary to the lie that Israel is an apartheid state, Israel has Arabs on their Supreme Court. Israel has Arabs in the Knesset. Israel has Arabs that serve in every function of government throughout Israel. Israeli Arab citizens have equal vote and representation in Israel. And Israel's hope is that all of the Arabs in Israel would become citizens, which would have equal representation and vote. The ones that aren't citizens because in order to be a citizen, you have to actually accept that Israel has a right to exist as a nation. That pretty big, it's like to be a citizen of the United States, you would have to say the United States has a right to exist as a nation. Yeah, it's kind of, yeah. So, yes.
Two things. The disparity between what's going on with the Arabs and the Israel, people of Israel, with the UN. The UN had something like 165 anti-Israel resolutions.
Yeah, if you want to know how evil if the UN didn't do all the things that they do with their people going into countries and sex slavery and rape and all that, which is strongly documented, the horrors that happen every time the UN goes into a nation. If you just looked at the equity of the resolutions that they make, Israel gets the largest amount of condemnations from the UN. Like Syria was in a civil war where they were killing off hundreds of thousands of their own population, and the UN didn't say a word. But somebody, like the person just this week or last week, a young person with a gun went into Israel, shot people indiscriminately, was in a synagogue, was shot for doing that, and the UN condemned Israel for killing the person that was a terrorist. So
the other thing is, I heard Ben Shapiro yesterday say that Orthodox Jews, 80% of the Orthodox Jews who vote are conservative, and they vote conservative. And it's, if the liberal Jew would just read the Torah, they're not religious at all.
okay, yeah. So what she's saying is that if liberal Jews would actually read the Torah, read the Tanakh, they would follow along with the Orthodox Jews in being conservative in their values and nature. Let me extend that because I don't like to just bash one group of people. I like to bash everybody equally. If Christians would believe the same thing and do the same thing, if they would actually read their Bible, they would reject the things that are. If you didn't read my blog this week, I encourage you to read my blog this week and then share it with other people. I rarely comment on my blogs in this way, but it's one of the most important messages that I've written in a while, and I encourage you not only to read it, but share it on your social media, because the deception of the enemy in our midst that replaces, because, and I'm sorry, I got other questions, but I'm going to say this stuff. Our nation, our modern people, the Western civilization society has believed a lie that lust is love. And the result of lust is homosexuality, it's pedophilia, it's rape, it's incest, it's all these demonic forms of sexual relations that are taking place because lust feeds self. Love is about the other person. When you love God, it's about serving God. It isn't about getting from God. The problem with modern faith, modern believers in Christianity, in Judaism, their faith is about what I can get from God, not how can I serve God, which is why they're anti-Torah, because Torah requires us to serve. But they're just about receiving. How can I get? And that is an evil, deceptive counterfeit. When you pray and it's all about you, that prayer is encased in the sin of lust. Because it's about what can I receive from that other person. Physical abuse in relationships is based on lust. All of it. And we need to be honest. These churches that are promoting homosexuality, there are ghastly videos that you can watch of these people presenting the new views within Methodism and Lutheranism and the Anglican Church in Europe, and where they are presenting God as a homosexual deviant. And it's based upon lust and greed and personal. I want it now and I want it my way. And until we change and affect those around us, until our service of God is about loving Him and not what we can get from it, we are not going to see the deception of the enemy, and God's serpent isn't going to consume the serpents of the enemy. And we need to get real about it. It's there's too many people. It's all about what I can get, what I can get, what I can get. Yeah, my favorite thing to do is to give. And that's with you guys. I watch you guys. I watch the people in this community that are givers and that give habitually, not out of just habit doing. There are people that do. When I used to travel around and preach and they would take up an offering, there's a unique thing that happens in an offering basket. Dollar bills are always folded and crunched. Larger bills are always left either flat or folded in half. When somebody gives a $50 bill in an offering, it is never folded up small and thrown in. Dollar bills are crumbled and thrown in. $50 bills, $100 bills, they're left nice and neat as if somebody had ironed them. So there's that thing that happens in offerings. But people do that in some cases so that they can be seen what they give. That's why there's two things we don't do here. And this is something that was in my heart when we started the congregation. We don't pass an offering plate to people because there's something manipulative about putting it there. People will say, you'll get more money that way. And it may be true, but I don't want more money. I want more people's hearts. Okay? The other thing is we don't do the whole, hold up your envelope and walk up front and do this whole big show. Because giving to God isn't about recognition. It's about giving. It's about doing. It's about being part of the mechanism of God to bless people and touch people. And there is this whole thing about giving that people give so that they can get recognition. When I grew up in my synagogue, every door in the building had a name on it. So-and-so donated this door. So-and-so donated this pew. So-and-so donated this window. So-and-so donated this. Every one of them did that. You go to the hospital, and this wing was donated by this person. This wing was donated by that person. And I appreciate the generosity. But sometimes I question the motive. And it's important that when we give, and we do, we are a giving congregation. I shocked some people the other week because when we bought this building, and most of you will know this, we bought this building, we borrowed $800,000 to buy this building. Now God worked a miracle because we committed to buy this building for $1.4 million when we rented it. And then God worked out circumstances where we bought it for $750,000. But in order to buy it for $750,000, we actually had to borrow $800,000 so we could cover all of the things that had to be covered to buy it. All the closing costs and all the things that go on. So that was 8 years ago. I think 8, 9 years ago, whatever it is now. We owe on this building now less than $400,000, which is miraculous that this group of people have faithfully gave enough that we can not only pay the bills, pay for all the things we do with the homeless ministry and our prison ministry and the giving we do and all the things that we do out of that, support missions and ministries outside of our community, all the things that we do, and still paid that much down on this building. And within, God willing, within the next year, we will be completely debt-free. But that's because people generously give, and none of the people that generously give want their name to be known that they gave. Nobody wanted us to announce. It frustrates me when I go someplace and say, so-and-so, a generous donor, has offered to match every donation up to this amount of money. Because if God moves on me to give $100,000 or $50,000 or $15,000 or $1,000, doesn't matter what it is, if He told me to give that obedience to Him isn't based upon other people matching what I'm giving. Just give it. And if God can move on your heart to do that, He can move on the other people's hearts, and they can equally give to match it. But it's one of those, I just feel icky when people do that. It's kind of like when I used to listen to Christian radio, and the guy would get on and say, okay guys, if we don't raise $20,000 by the end of this month, we're going to go off the air. Every week. Every month they were going off the air if they didn't raise a certain amount of money. Just stop. We should be the most faithful people to God simply because He's God. And we love Him. And if we do that, there will always be sufficiency. That's the reason when we talk about the offering, I rarely talk about money coming in and giving. We say, hey, there's a box by the door. That's where you give your tithe and offering. If you want to be obedient to God and bless our community, there's a box. We're not going to take 15 minutes to sing a slow song, show a video, tell you what was on the video, give instructions on how to fill out the envelope, tell you to borrow money on your credit card so that we can meet our needs. Just not going to happen. Either we believe in a benevolent God who meets our needs so that we can meet other people's needs, or we don't. And if you're only giving to God because someone told you if you give, He'll give you 10% more, 50% more, 100% more, that you can't outgive Him, that you just need to give so that you'll get, keep your money. Now, I want to be clear, that doesn't do away with the fact that God is faithful and He will bless His people. Amen. And He does bless obedience if your heart is doing it out of love. But if you're trying to manipulate God, let me help you. The basis of all of our theology has to be God is smart. And none of us are good enough con men that we're going to get over on God and manipulate Him into doing something that He shouldn't do because we convinced Him, we conned Him into it. It's just not going to happen, and we need to just stop. Amen. Okay, let me go to another question. Is it hot in here to anybody but me? Okay, would the 50% of you that think it's hot raise your hands? Would the 50% who think it's not hot raise your hands? See how that works? Okay, here's what I'd like to... I'm going to just take my coat off.
Stop there, please.
Thank you for doing that off camera. You don't want to feel the phone.
Nobody saw that. Okay. Okay, so let me move on to a couple other questions. That was childish, Rabbi, I know. Okay, it's over with. Okay, in the Parsha, this question came from Susie. In this week's Parsha, and this was actually last week, I think. No, this week. This week's Parsha. In Exodus 16, where they talk about collecting twice as much manna on the 6th day, so they'd have it for Shabbat. Is this so God doesn't have to work on the Shabbat and send manna? Or is this so people don't have to work to harvest it, or both? I've heard some people interpret this section as to say that in addition to not going out to harvest or purchase food, we're also not supposed to cook food on Shabbat. I don't see that. In verse 23 it says, bake whatever you would bake, boil whatever you would boil, store up for yourselves everything that remains to be kept until the morning. But it doesn't say anything on the order of you're not to cook on Shabbat, only that you're not to gather manna on Shabbat. If we're really not supposed to cook our food on Shabbat, I know some people... Are we really not supposed to cook our food on Shabbat? I know some people see cooking as a chore. But what if we like to cook and find it relaxing? I always appreciate your words of wisdom. I love you. You are the most brilliant person in the world. So, okay. Yeah. That was Joe's love note. It was just copy and pasted onto the... Okay, so here's the thing. The answer to the first question is yes. God doesn't work on Shabbat. We don't work on Shabbat. As to the second question, it depends. And here's where it depends. There is nothing wrong with heating food on Shabbat, in preparing food that's ready on Shabbat to serve your family. Matter of fact, in Exodus 12 it says this: for 7 days you're to eat matzah, but on the first day you must remove all chametz from your house. For whoever eats chametz on the first day, from the first day till the 7th day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. The first day is to be a holy assembly for you, as well as the 7th day. No matter of work is to be done on those days, except what is to be eaten by every person. That alone you may prepare. So Passover, the first day, the 7th day, are holy days. These are Shabbats. And it says if somebody is going to eat on that day, you can prepare it. Now that means you don't prepare for the next day. It also means you don't create it. Like we at our house, I'll tell you what we do. We only eat on Sabbath what was prepared before Sabbath. But we'll heat it up on Sabbath. Like if there's a bowl of soup, we'll heat it up, but we won't make soup. Because making involves, in my heart, creation. I'm taking things that weren't and making them into something that is. So we don't create something, but we will heat up something. Now, to go along with this, and this is important, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. The heart is what matters. Okay? On Shabbat, we should only do things that honor God. It should be about Him, not us. Okay? On Sabbath, the priests prepared and killed and offered sacrifices. Okay? It was unto God. Who ate those sacrifices? The priests. Is that cooking on Shabbat? Okay, but is it cooking for the benefit of the priests, or is it cooking for the benefit of God, and the result of benefiting God is that the people were blessed also? That's what we're talking about. If you can do it before Shabbat, do it before Shabbat, prepare it, have it ready. There are all kinds of laws in the Jewish side of things. For instance, if you're making cholent, which is like a stew, you're supposed to cook it at least halfway before Shabbat. That's a rabbinic edict. So that you're already done, it's already prepared, it's more than halfway ready, and then it just heats up during the time. There's nothing in the Scripture that says you have to do that. It's just a protection for the people so that they won't be making the cholent on Shabbat. Make sure it's done before. Our heart, is what I'm doing benefit to God and blessing God, or am I doing it because of my own selfishness? Again, many people say I have to do this on Shabbat because I couldn't do it before Shabbat. When in most cases, it's I have to do it on Shabbat because I didn't do it before Shabbat. Because Shabbat wasn't a high enough priority in our life to rearrange the other things we were doing instead of doing what we were doing for preparing. So, there's nothing in the Bible against cooking on Shabbat. I read you a verse on one of the high Shabbats where it says you can prepare food for those that are there. But we shouldn't go shopping on Shabbat to buy the food. We shouldn't be chopping up the food so that we can get it ready. We shouldn't be, all of those things should be done before Shabbat. So we're just heating up whatever it is if it needs to be heated. Let me tell you how ridiculous this stuff gets on the Jewish side of stuff. If you want tea, hot tea, like you want a cup of hot tea, you're not allowed to just turn the water on Shabbat. But you can heat the water before Shabbat. Okay? But you can't pour the water from the container that heated the water, held the hot water, into your cup with the tea bag. Because by adding the water into the cup with the tea bag, you're cooking the tea from that. So what you have to do is pour the water from that container into another container, and then pour the water from the other container after 5 minutes into the container with the tea, and then put the tea bag in it. So that there's this step that allowed cooling to take place in between the hot water, and that's redunculous. Okay? Our hearts matter. I can tell you, I don't shop on Shabbat. I don't go to a store on Shabbat. I don't buy things on Shabbat. But if Caleb was walking down the road all by himself and I found him on Shabbat and he hadn't eaten, and I was in the middle of somewhere and there was nowhere I could get food other than buying it, I would buy food for Caleb on Shabbat. Because that, I believe, would be honoring God for that. However, if Caleb was just hanging out at my house and said, "Hey, Rabbi, can I go to McDonald's?" First, I'd say, "No, we don't go to McDonald's." But second, I would say, "No, we'll get something out the refrigerator or out the cupboard and we'll eat, or we'll get a couple slices of bread and put peanut butter on. But we're not going shopping on Shabbat." But so I don't know if that answered your question, but it was a good explanation of not answering your question. So, yes.
Did he say you're not supposed to make a sandwich either?
No.
No, you didn't say it?
No.
It's okay to make a sandwich?
It depends. And this goes to heart. I won't make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but I will make a peanut butter sandwich. But I don't put that on other people, because your peanut butter and jelly meld together becomes something other than just peanut butter. Right. So I don't, but that is my own personal conviction. I also don't go to the beach, but I don't stop people from going to the beach. Okay, there's things I don't personally do because of my own convictions and my own way of doing things, and because I find that as a rabbi, I have to personally do more than what's required so that the people that follow me will at least do what is required. So what was your other question?
You just answered it.
And we're now out of time. I have a couple of questions I'm going to answer next week. One is Sam's question and one is Anonymous's question.